Good afternoon. I'm Danny Smith, sports editor of the Starkville Daily News. Bringing in again Joel Coleman. He's our Mississippi State beat writer, and it's another big weekend of football. We have a lot of teams on the road, but one main team that's at home for the third straight week in college football is the Mississippi State Bulldogs, and they're opening up SEC play, and it's a very big game for Mississippi State and Kentucky. Kentucky's already lost a game in the conference, so it's they're really needing the win in the SEC. Mississippi State would definitely like to get off on a good note.
There's no doubt about it. It's going to be a huge game for both teams. Both teams are probably going to come in, quite frankly, I know Joe Moorhead didn't want to use the word the other day, but desperate. You got Mississippi State coming off a loss to Kansas State. Little bit of a little consternation, I guess, amongst the fan base and things right now, because not a whole lot of folks thought that was a game last week that Mississippi State would lose, but they lost it. And on the other side of the coin there, you got a Kentucky team that had, quite frankly, they had the Gators beat a week ago. Had Dan Mullen and the Gators defeated for all intents and purposes, and then Florida came storming back, and Kentucky missed a field goal that could have possibly won the game, and anyway, they ended up losing too. So what you got now is a couple of teams that are all kinds of desperate to get a win on Saturday. State needs it all kinds of bad. I think just so the program can kind of take a breath. It seems weird that one loss has kind of caused all of this concern, but I think that one loss kind of harkened back bad memories of a year ago whenever State, the offense kind of struggled at times, and the offense, you can blame it on some things. Tommy Stevens, who we'll talk about in a second, he was a little bit banged up this past Saturday. So then also you had a true freshman running the offense in the second half. But there were a lot of concerning things in that one game. And it was just one loss. But I think so much of the concern for Mississippi State, or at least amongst the fan base and those that support Mississippi State and watch Mississippi State, is just that were the danger signs that we saw last Saturday, were they mistakes, or is that who this team is? Yeah. And you'll kind of get some answers to that question, to those questions on Saturday. I don't know. It's going to be a huge game, and in some ways, some of the same storylines this week as we had a week ago. Right. Tommy Stevens, is he healthy? Is he not? Last week he went out there and started the game and had to be removed from the game because he stiffened up at halftime. This week, kind of like we said last week, Tommy talked to the media on Tuesday night. Usually if a guy talks to the media, that means that he's going to probably play the following week. If they're hurt, they don't typically talk to us. They don't usually allow them to talk to us. But he did on Tuesday, and supposedly, according to Joe and according to Tommy, he's further along at this point this week than he was at this point last week. So all that seems to indicate to me that starting quarterback on Saturday is going to be Tommy Stevens. But it was last week too, and they took him out of the game, and Garrett Schrader had to take the second half. Could that happen again? Yeah, I guess it could. So we'll see. It's going to be a humongous game, like you said. And if State wins, they can kind of reset and start to rinse away the disappointment of the Kansas State loss. And if State loses, then folks might start getting out pitchforks and be a little upset over things. So we'll see how that goes. But a lot of interesting stuff to follow on Saturday. I feel like we talk about this every week too. Suspension stuff. Yeah. Now through the first 3 games, the same group of guys have been suspended for the first 3 games, except for Lee Autry, who did play in the Southern Miss game. I would expect, and this is just guessing, no one has told me this isn't anything that State has confirmed because they're not talking suspension stuff. But I would have to think at this point, this might be the first game this year that you see a full-strength Mississippi State team. With the SEC opener coming off of a game that you lost, I think it's an ideal time to let Willie Gay and Marcus Murphy and all those guys that have been suspended for a violation of team rules for the first 3 games of the year. According to all of the things we know, a lot of those guys get to play in 4 games this year. My opinion is they need to play in 4 toss-up games, 4 games that they can have an impact. And Kentucky on Saturday is a game Mississippi State has to have. If I was a betting man, I would guess that the State's going to be at full strength and let those guys play on Saturday. So, as usual on a SEC Saturday, a lot of storylines to follow. So, I'm interested to see what happens there and if State can bounce back. Is there anything particular you're looking for on Saturday?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see because Kentucky's already has that one SEC loss, so they're going to need to bounce back. And it's going to be interesting to see if Kentucky wilts and folds in the fourth quarter again like they did last week. But I don't think Mississippi State can wait to find that out. They need to jump out really quick and get a handle on this game early, and then maybe Kentucky will succumb to the pressure of the road earlier, and hopefully Mississippi State will take advantage of that home field advantage.
And I think too, as far as Kentucky goes, I think they've got a guy or two that may be out because of some targeting penalties late in that game against Florida, and
of course they lost their quarterback for the season.
For the season, that's right. So this will actually be their second game now without him. You wonder if their offense might click a little better now in week 2 with the backup quarterback. In the game, everybody kind of maybe a little more used to his style of play. Sometimes that chemistry takes a minute to develop, but that's some things I guess to look for on the Kentucky side. But man, it is huge. You hate to say that it's bigger for one team than the other because I don't cover Kentucky, so I don't know what their mindset is coming in. But I do know that from being around the Mississippi State program and of course talking to fans, being in Starkville, it's one of the hot topics is always Mississippi State. I know there's some folks desperate for a win this week, so it is humongous for Mississippi State, and I think that it's big. I think Joe Moorhead and company could use a big sigh of relief and breath of fresh air with a win on Saturday. We'll see if they get it.
Well, it's definitely the biggest game in the area, high school or college, but as usual in these parts, we do have a handful of some really interesting high school games. We got Strawfoot Meridian. Starkville did bounce back last week to get a win, and they go to a Meridian team that's struggling. Starkville Academy goes to Lake Academy down in Madden, a team that it used to be a district game for Starkville Academy. It isn't anymore, but they still like to go down there and win. But the biggest game probably is another road game. All of our teams seem to be on the road this week, but East Webster, who you saw last week, is going up to East Union for a very big game. It's going to be our game of the week, even though it's a road game. It's the best game we've got. So your thoughts on the Wolverines and the chances they've got?
I was all kinds of impressed with East Webster a week ago. It was fun to talk to Coach Price after that game, and he had mentioned that in that same game, which I guess was the fourth game of the season last year, East Webster had played Starkville Academy in the fourth game last year, and Starkville Academy just ran them off the field. It was, I think, 51-0 or something like that. It was an absolute mauling is what it was. And he had challenged his guys going into that Choctaw County game a week ago. He said, all right, it's been a year since that. We're 3-0. This is a test for us against the 3A program to see, how far we've come in a year's time. And look, Choctaw County, they didn't play their best brand of football on Friday night, to be fair. They had their fair share of mistakes and lost some snaps over the quarterback's head and gave East Webster a safety. And there was all kinds of, ugly, if you want to call it that, from Choctaw County a week ago. But good teams take advantage of mistakes, and East Webster did. And Stephen Betts, quarterback for East Webster, had an outstanding night.
He's getting better.
He's getting better and better, and he's kind of got he's a guy I like to watch because he just seems like a leader. He's got the components of a leader. Seems like he's a strong personality guy. He is a lot of fun to watch, and he kind of took over that ball game. And not just in pro football or college football, but in high school football, if you've got a quarterback, you got a chance every Friday night. And I think Stephen Betts is a guy that's going to give East Webster a chance every Friday night, including tonight against East Union. Don't know how it'll go, but at this point, 4-0, East Webster is rolling. I wouldn't count out the Wolverines in any game right now.
Yeah. Well, the Wolverines are trying to stay undefeated to be the only team in our area that's still can say that if they beat East Union. But we've got Yapor. They're on the road again at Houston. They'll be trying to bounce back with a win, as well as Choctaw County. You mentioned them. French Camp that won their first game last week will be back on the road at Tupelo Christian. And then over in Clay County, you've got all three of the the Clay County teams are on the road. West Point's at Knoxville, Oak Hill's at Winston Academy, and Hebron's on the road at Kemper Academy.
When I look at Eupora schedule, that's, I guess I think that's really our one area team that I still haven't seen yet. But what I do see is their schedule there in front of us. They're 1-3.
It's brutal.
But that's a schedule that there's no shame in being 1-3 against.
Yeah.
I mean, when you play Winona, who is outstanding, and you play a Noxapater team that I saw when they played Starkville Academy a few weeks ago. I mean, they're a really good football team. They've played some games in which you don't like to lose, but if you do lose, you understand why,
Right.
kind of thing. It's getting to, and Houston is traditionally a really good team too. So the schedule doesn't really seem to be lightening up much for them this week. So if playing tough opposition molds your team and makes your team, you boys are going to be all tough in that stretch run because they played some tough opposition so far. And Choctaw County sitting there at 1-3 right now. You got to think as time goes along that they're just going to get better and better under Coach Roberts. Ron Price, talked to him at East Webster the other day about this. It takes a little bit when you take over a program. He was talking about how a few games into his East Webster tenure a couple years ago, he was like, nothing that we did seemed to go right. Like any way we turned was the wrong way, kind of thing. And I think Choctaw County's getting a little bit of that right now as they kind of get their feet wet with a new coach and a new program. But all you got to do is watch them to see that there's a lot of talent on the field. And, yeah, there's some kinks to iron out. But I would be surprised, too, if Choctaw County doesn't start to add to that win total here starting soon, maybe as soon as tonight against Kosciuszko on what I believe is homecoming night in Akron.
Yeah. Well, as the weather gets cooler, hopefully it will, district play will be around the corner, and then these games will start meaning something, and then the playoffs will be here before you know it. But
already about halfway there.
Yeah.
In some instances, some classifications only play 10 regular season games and week 5, so hard to believe we're about halfway to the playoffs.
Season's flying by, but we enjoy talking about it, so it's time to sign off, but we'll enjoy this week's games, everybody. Until next time, this is Danny Smith and Joel Coleman.